insisted that tyrants were rulers who violated the terms of the political covenant which God had established by his word. John Witt, in his book, The Reformation of Rights, if you want to read a lot of Beza, get John Witt's book, The Reformation of Rights, fabulous book. He says, quote, for Beza, tyrants were rulers who violated the terms of the political covenant, particularly its foundational requirements that all must honor the rights of God to be worshipped and the rights of God's people to discharge their duties of the faith in conformity with God's law. It was Beza, more than it was Calvin, who advanced the doctrine of interposition, where the lesser magistrate could resist and overthrow, if necessary, the tyrant. And that's what our founders relied upon, this doctrine of interposition, where the Continental Congress, the lesser magistrate, could lawfully wage a rebellion against the unlawful king who violated his covenant, George and Parliament. According to Beza, if the ruler exceeded his authority in violation of the political covenant, the people, through their representatives, had both the right and the duty to resist him as a tyrant. It was this doctrine of interposition, or as we call it, the doctrine of the lesser magistrate, that was restored by Beza, by Calvin, by Alpheus, and which was resorted to by the American Puritan colonists during the late 1700s, sparking the American War for Independence. And during the years of the Reformation, John Calvin admonished the people of Geneva in a stern warning. And he said this, quote, and ye, O peoples, to whom God give the liberty to choose your own magistrates, see to it that ye do not forfeit this favor by electing to the position of highest honor rascals and enemies of God. This warning might as well be given to the 20th and the 21st century evangelical Christian community, but you know that. Today we see very real outcry from any quarter as to the apostasy of our civil magistracy from Christians today, and we see no outrage. But these are outrageous times. We need to be outraged. So let's ask another question. Why? Why is the community of the church so complacent? And why, if she is involved, as some of them are, why is she so syncretistic? Why has she swallowed in the world? Why has she been compromised by the things of the world? Well, the answer is quite simple, because the church has lost her vision of what it means to be at liberty under God. And not only have we lost the vision, we have become like Israel, desiring a king or a political party or an economic system to rule over us like other nations. Rather than rebuking and abstaining from the workers of iniquity, many Christians run to them for safety and the hope of prosperity. Again, another pagan notion that we've adopted. America's hope is not in any political party, nor is it in politics per se. It is not in capitalism or in finance. It is not going to be found by dissolving the Fed. Well, that would be good. But that's not where our hope is found. It's not rooted in that, nor is America's hope in the court system. Well, we've just got another Supreme House conservative. Man, we're in. America's hope is in the sovereign Christ. I mean, it's as simple as that. There are so many who verbally state that they want to reform the nation and bring it back to the morality of Scripture. They speak many words and they act in contrary, however, to what they say. Too many of these are still eating at Jezebel's table, which is a statist table, wiping their mouth and saying that they haven't really done anything wrong. Today, too many saints have bought into the lie that the government is here to help us and to provide for us cradle-to-grave assistance. What's that slogan they use? I'm here for the government, I'm here to help you. Don't believe it. They want to give us everything. Prosperity, safety, hope, peace. They want to provide for us everything from medical insurance to education to employment to pensions to careers and government jobs. The IRS, the TSA, the EPA, the FDA, the armed forces, the legislative houses, licensing agencies, Homeland Security, and the list goes on and on and on. And American Christians have yoked themselves the beast of statism. And like Israel, they desire Saul. Without even knowing it or even wanting to know it. The community of Christendom has forged what I believe is an unholy alliance with God's enemies, thinking that appeasing the oppressor will ensure their survival, not realizing that the appeasement of the beast only stirs its wrath. You see, American Christians seem to think that if they act according to the liking of the beast, believing its lies, getting involved in their programs, and refraining from antagonizing it, the beast will spare them. It will not. In the end, it will destroy them all the same. Let me tell you a story. Consider the story of the turtle and the scorpion. The scorpion seeks to gain access upon the turtle's back because it wants to cross the stream. It doesn't swim. It needs to get on the turtle's shell, on his back, to cross the stream. And of course, the turtle says, "I'm sorry, Mr. Scorpion. I am not going to take you across the stream because if I hit you on my back, you will sting me and I will die." But the scorpion, he says, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to sting you because, if I sting you, we'll both die. I'm not going to sting you." So the turtle, he contemplates. He says, "Okay, I agree. I'll take you across the stream." So the scorpion climbs on the turtle's back, and the turtle starts across the stream. And halfway across the stream, the scorpion stings the turtle. And the turtle exclaims, What did you do? What did you do? You said you wouldn't kill me. Now we're both going to drown. Why did you do that?" The scorpion turns to the turtle and says, "I can't help it. It's my nature." It's the nature of man, when given unrestrained political power, to enslave, to impoverish, and to humiliate, and eventually to kill, if he is not restrained by the law of God. In doing so, like the scorpion and the turtle, he kills both himself and the people of his charge. Okay, so what's our problem? To answer this, Buddy Hansen gives a wonderful illustration. It is said that it is hard to read the label from the inside of the jar. But that's exactly where we are in the early years of the 21st century. The cultural jar into which we have allowed ourselves to be placed and confined is the result of a century and a half of preferring the world's ways to God's. This has so influenced the way we look at life that when we decide to do something, quote-unquote, about our culture, we act according to non-Christian tactics and don't even realize that we are doing so. In other words, trying to change the culture by acting according to the dictates of our culture and reestablishing the position of godless rulers avails nothing, but rather exacerbates the problem and brings the wrath of God down upon us more ferociously. Buddy Hansen continues, he says this, "What is not understood is that by acting naturally, rather than supernaturally or biblically, we are guaranteeing that the non-Christian agenda will continue to influence the culture." So the answer to our political, economic, militaristic, and cultural problems is not whether the Republicans or the Democrats gain control over several branches of government. Our problem will only be remedied when God's people stop making excuses for their acquiescence to wickedness and tyranny and devote themselves to an expressly Christian world and life view that seeks to advance the crown rights of Christ and not the lordship of man. Howard Phillips coined this statement. He said, "Liberals are going off the cliff at 100 miles per hour, and the conservatives are going off the cliff at 50 miles an hour. Both are going to crash." You see, as long as our approach is godless, that is non-theocratic, not theonomic, not biblically reconstructive in our thinking, we will continue to lose ground. As long as we continue to think like the world, will be snared and enslaved by the world. As long as we continue to forge alliances with the wicked of the world, we will lose God's support, and His holy justice will fall upon our family, our nation, and us as individuals. Patriotism is probably best defined by Abigail Adams, when she clearly stated, "A patriot without religion, in my estimation, is as great a paradox as an honest man without the fear of God. Is it possible," she says, "that he who has not moral obligations bind can have any real goodwill toward men? Can he be a patriot who, by an openly vicious conduct, is undermining the very bonds of society? The Scriptures tell us, righteousness exalts a nation." See, we stand at a crossroads. While we may not avoid the destruction of our culture, we may still avoid the comprehensive totality of God's wrath upon ourselves. Reverend Stephen Perks of the Kuiper Institute warns, the created order of God's sovereignty is vested totally in Christ. Nowhere else in the created order is such total sovereignty exercised. All other persons and spheres of authority are restricted. This means that all reductionist theories of mankind and human society are idolatrous. Totalitarianism, which reduces man to one function of human society, namely the state, for which it claims total sovereignty, is idolatrous. Patriarchalism, in which the whole of human society is subdued and subsumed under the family and all of the spheres subordinate to it, is also idolatrous. Ecclesiocentrism, in which the whole of life of man and society is subordinated to the church, is equally idolatrous, as is liberalism, libertinism, in which the whole of human life is subservient to the individual. Christianity teaches, rather, that any of these, including ecclesiocentrism, which is the centrality of the church, barring everything else, that Christ is the center of creation, that only He is sovereign over the whole creation, and that all institutions and spheres, legitimate in their own right and independent of each other's devoted authority structures, must subordinate themselves in all things to Him and His Word. Therefore, Solomon's profound truth rings out. There's nothing new under the sun. Christians must once again decide between Christ or Caesar, between God or Baal, between the table of the Lord and the table of idols, between bondservants under God's law, being slaves of sin, the lust of the flesh, serving corruptors and the promoters of wickedness. So, we ask the question, so will we continue to be like sheep to the slaughter, or will we be men of faith and resolve, relying upon God alone for every blessing, and then using the tactics and the strategies of Scripture to bring about this desired end? See, the future of our heritage depends upon our answer. So what is the answer? I told our meeting this morning that we'd love to take a sermon at the end. And start at the end where the Puritans used to say, now let me give you what to do on Monday morning in 12 particulars. You need to know what to do tomorrow morning. You need to know where you're going to go tomorrow and how you're going to make a change. How are you going to win back what we've given away? So what's the answer? What are the particular logistics we need to embrace? Well, since this is an old election day sermon, I'll give you a quote from an old election day sermon. The Reverend Timothy Stone asked this question in 1792, 5 years before his death. On the heels of the independence of the colonies and the ratification of the Constitution, he preached a sermon before the Connecticut governor and legislature in an appeal to the need for a true community, a true biblical community, if liberty was to survive. Notice what he says. Notice what he said. He's saying that in order for liberty to survive, the community must be rooted in truth. And his text comes from Deuteronomy 4, 5, and 6. And the text goes like this. Moses stating, behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my God commanded. You should do so in the land whither you go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them. For this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people. For what nation is there so great, who hath God so nigh unto them as the Lord our God in all things that we can call upon Him for? And what nation is there so great that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law, which I set before you this day? Only take heed unto yourself, and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. That was the verse that he used to launch his sermon. And he said this: we are not left in doubt concerning the wisdom and salutary nature of that Constitution under which the Hebrews were placed, as it proceeded immediately from God, and in reference to the particular circumstances of the people, was the result of unerring perfection. It was a free constitution in which all the valuable rights of the community were most happily secured. The public good was the great object in view, and the most effective was taken to preserve the rights of individuals. Proper rewards were promised to the obedient, and righteous punishments allotted for the disobedient. God's design was that the seed of Abraham should be distinguished in a peculiar manner from all other nations. He therefore undertook the government of them himself, in all manners, respecting religion, civil polity, and that military establishment which he saw to be necessary for their happiness and defense. He continues. We find Moses, who received this constitution from God and delivered it to his people, frequently exhorting them to maintain a sacred regard for this divine institution and to pay conscientious obedience to all of its laws. Doing this, they might secure to themselves national prosperity and enjoy the unfailing protection of Almighty God. End quote. See, the argument Reverend Stone makes is that God had given to Moses the parameters by which the nation should function. And if they followed the standards of God's law in regard to their civil polity, by being biblically obedient, they would be counted wise among the nations. They would be counted an understanding people. If they failed to esteem his laws highly, and obey them diligently in every sphere of life, it would be a foolish people, without regard for other nations, worthy only of God's frowning providence and severe chastisements, nationally, ecclesiastically, family-wise, and individually. Stone's counsel was for the people of the newly liberated America to exercise wisdom in the civil affairs of governance and jurisprudence. And here's what he counseled. Number one, wisdom will direct the community to establish a good, God-fearing, and biblically lawful system of government. That wisdom comes from God's law. Two, the wisdom of a people will appear in the united exertions to support only a good system of government in its regular administrations. Only a good system, a godly system. How many times have we supported something that was pretty good? It wasn't great. But you know, that's what we've got. Number three, the wisdom of a people will appear in the election of good and God-fearing rulers. We live amongst a foolish people. It is your task to educate them so that the fool is not destroyed in his folly. Number four, wisdom will lead a people to maintain a sacred regard to biblical righteousness in reference to both the public and to individuals. And finally, the wisdom of a people essentially consists in paying an unfeigned obedience to the institutes of that religion, which is Christianity, which the supreme lawgiver hath established in his church on earth. That religion which God hath enjoined upon rational beings is not only necessary for his glory, but essential to their happiness. And he concludes with this, and so shall I. He says, you gentlemen, remember he's addressing the magistrates, you gentlemen are vested with an authority which men of wisdom and virtue will reveal, which when properly exercised, none can resist, without resisting the ordinance of God, and preserving in their resistance must receive to themselves damnation, if they persevere in that resistance. May you ever, he says, exercise such a steadfastness in the meekness of wisdom for the best good of your brethren, agreeably to those unchangeable laws of righteousness and goodness which the supreme lawgiver hath established in his moral kingdom, so that no iniquity may be found in the place of righteousness, or wickedness in the place of judgment. Beloved, may God give us that eternal divine vigilance to boldly and clearly teach and declare God's law, so that it may one day be embraced as the only wisdom for men and nations. And in this way, the prophecy will be finally realized, so that the knowledge of the Lord will one day again, maybe even in our lifetime to some degree, but most certainly in the generations to come, that the knowledge of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. And it will be at that time that every knee shall bow and every tongue confess that Jesus is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. May God have mercy upon us. May God have mercy upon America. May God have mercy upon the Church of Jesus Christ. She might regain her footing in time and in history, even in our time, in our history, to the praise of the glory of his grace.